So I'm going to do this with a large wire so it's easy for you to see, but using either round nose pliers or a rolling tool, anything that's got a diameter, a small diameter that you can wrap around, just get your wire, wrap it around the tool or whatever you're using. There you go. And then you can snip that off, and you've got yourself an eye and a leg that you can put into your drilled hole. So it's not difficult to do. So that's your best bet if you've not got enough eyes. Right, I'm going to do my best, but it's not easy to focus the camera on the mast and show you what we're doing. But we're going to do our first bit of rigging here. So I'm just going to pass our rigging thread through this upper eye. And then we can make a knot. Now there's two different ways of doing this. You can actually tie a knot if you wish, or you can just glue the two parts sandwiched together, which is a little bit more authentic. On the actual ship, the rope would have been tied together with thread and lashed. It's sometimes difficult to do that, and if you're a beginner, yeah, you need more thread than you've got in the kit. So what we need to do is glue it. So I'm using some medium CA to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of medium CA on the inside of the thread there. So you can see how that thread has now grabbed. So then we need to take that up through its next point and do exactly the same on the top termination. I can't easily do that on camera, so what we'll do is we'll do that, but you now know how we're doing these connection points. So we'll just glue them together like that, and then once the glue is dried, and it only takes a few seconds, we can come in with our nipper, nip that off, and we've got a glued line. So that's the simplest form of giving you a seized look. Now you could come with a very fine thread and wrap it round and tie it off if you wanted, which would give you a more authentic look. I'm not going to do that in this instance. So I'm going to seize the line at the top, and then that's our first line on. I'm using the same process that we used on the first line that we added for these turnbuckles. So this is line number 1 on the plans, and it comes off one of the turnbuckles, terminates below the first set of yard arms, and I'm going to do it in exactly the same way. So we're going to put a little bit of CA in the middle of those two lines there, and just clamp them together he says. It's so difficult to film these things. Just give that a moment. There we go. So that's that line on. I just moved the boom, which I think that's got to be my next job, is to secure the boom before we go any further. Okay, so I'm happy that that is on. So next job I think is rigging the boom, and I might be able to film that better for you. Right, we are going to do this bit of what looks quite complicated, but I'm sure it won't be when we sort it. I'm going to do that next, which will just hold our boom in place and stop me knocking it and moving it. So to help us with that, we're going to use one of these. This is for threading the eye of a needle. Get a good quality one which has a point, not the cheap ones you get in supermarkets. They're great for helping you get the line through the eye on the block. So yeah, let me see if I can get you a good position to view this without getting in my way. Okay, so all of this gets tied off on the two cleats either side here ultimately. So we can start by threading through the blocks, and then we can get it all taut when we tie it off. So I'm going to start by threading the line through the first lower block, which is this one here, and you're going to have to mind fingers a little bit, I'm afraid. If I get the block in my tweezers so it's not waggling about. Again, this is so difficult when you're on camera because I do it completely differently. Right. For a start, I'd have my head where your where you lot guys are. No, I can't do this on camera, I don't think. Okay, it's so difficult to do this on camera because I need to be looking at multiple directions all at once, so you're constantly moving your head around, which means you just don't get to see anything. But we have our thread through the first block, and that will just gently pull through. So I'm happy with that, although it's made this fray. So right now we're just gonna snip the end off so we've got a fresh end for the next. Right, so this then is coming up to a block that is suspended from here, and we haven't done that, I've just realised, so we need to put some blocks on there. So we have blocks suspended off our loops in the middle, so let's make them up. So to do that, we'll get the blocks, we'll tie some cord around it, glue that cord, and then through the rings, seize it in the same way as we did on the turnbuckles. Okay, we have our blocks now in place under the boom, and from this block that we've just threaded through, we're now heading to this middle block, and we want to go in from the back and come out at the front. So I'm going to try and do that on camera, but I can't guarantee anything at this stage. you know what, all you're seeing is my hand and I can't see the block, so I'll thread it and then come back to you. Okay, got it through using our needle eye threader. So coming out of the back of that block, it then comes down to the block closest to us on this side. So again, this time it's going from the front to the back, so I need to I can't do this on camera. Okay, so I won't show you the threading of the blocks because it's just too difficult, but we can show you the flow here. So we've got first block pass through, then we're going up through the top, then we're looping back down through this one here. So when we tie this off on the cleat, we'll be able to pull that tight. So I think that's my next job, is to just tie it off at the cleat, and then we can start getting things tight as we go. So I've put a little bit of adhesive on the knot here at the back. I'll just hold that in place. We don't need to trim it just yet. And then we can tighten this first rope on its block. So you sort of have to hold the block in the position you want it to be in, and then pull your thread tight so that it's behaving the way you want it to, and then pull it tight into your next block. Want to make sure the boom stays in the middle. There we go. And then whilst you're pulling that tight, you can pull it through the next block as well. Okay, so that's sort of looking right now. So going back to my plan, I can see that that then goes through the back of this block and then heads forward through that block. So I'm going to do that off camera and then I'll show it to you because I need to be on the other side. So I have now completed the rigging at the boom, so that's this here. If you follow it step by step, it's not difficult. You can see the flow of the arrows, tells you which way to go, and you're basically tying off on a cleat there and then a cleat there. So that is complete, and if we pan along this way, you can see that the turnbuckles are now rigged, and that's because we've done this piece of rigging here. So number one going off the first turnbuckle, and then number 6 going off the second turnbuckle. And I can't get all this in shot, the camera won't focus because it's a white mask with busy stuff in the background, so I'll take a few pictures. So I have to admit I've struggled with these sails. I don't know what the material is, but my material glue that I've used on other sails in the past just hasn't worked with this. It won't bond it. It's I don't know, and it's not like it's gone off because it's a new jar of it. So yeah, I'm not sure what's going on there. So what I've decided to do is, rather than folding it over like this, I'm just going to cut it off, which means it'll be thinner, but it's not going to be noticeably that different. And we'll do it that way. They're not the best looking sails, to be honest, but you know, they probably replicate a modern material quite well. I don't really know. So I'm going to cut off all the bits for folding over, and then we can start getting the sails on. Okay, so I've cut my sails down and we're pretty much ready to go. I'm just going to trim that off. I just try not to see the black lines if I can. Okay, sails are now cut out, and what we need to do is punch little holes where we're going to be threading. Now, I'm going to be threading with a needle. I like the curved needles as opposed to the more traditional needles, partly because the length of traditional needles just makes it a little bit more difficult to sew, I think, but it's personal choice. So I'm going to punch the holes using the needles that the needle that I'm going to be using for passing through our rigging thread. So we just want to punch through wherever there's a marker for an eye, and punch our needle through. It only takes a minute. Pass it through so you know that the widest part of the needle can pass through, and that'll make the job easier when we're tacking it onto the model. Well, I'm having all sorts of problems with these sails. They are ripping, they're falling apart. So I've decided I'm abandoning using the sails altogether. So we will rig it without the sails. She'll still look cool. I very rarely put sails on. I have done sails in the past, but they generally get in the way of the look. So on period ships, I generally don't. I had intended to on this, but I'm struggling so much with the quality of the material, I've decided that I'm not going to. So that means we can get on with some of our rigging tasks a little bit more quickly. And we do have some main rigging that goes on that some of the sails would have been hanging off, and we're perhaps going to start there. I generally, when I'm working with rigging, I start from the middle and work outwards, because you're not tripping over yourself and trying to tie knots behind lines you've already done. So we have some that are centered around the mast and along the center line of the ship, so that's what we're going to do. We have one or two that look a bit dubious. So for example, this here, we're supposed to put a block on that and then tie a thread to that, but that's already right above it. So that makes absolutely no sense to me. And then it ties off on this cleat. So am I going to put a block on? Because by the time you've tied the block's going to be at the same height as that. Possibly not. We might just run the thread, tie the thread off and run the thread through the eye, for example. So I don't mind simplifying this one a little bit. If I was doing a period ship, I'd take a more period approach to the rigging, but at this stage I just want to get this done, and I'm mindful that we're trying to do this build with beginners sort of in mind, but to be honest, you have to do all your builds the way that suits you, so you put more and less effort in depending on how much you're enjoying it and what you're going to do with it. So I don't think we're going to detract from it by simplifying things in one or two places. Right, the rigging plan is not the easiest to follow, so pick a number and then follow it as best you can. You do have to reference several different photographs to see what you're doing, but yeah. So we're going to start with rigging line number 7, which goes from this point here and needs to be glued into place before being tied off up the mast. So to glue it into place, simply using some medium CA, and we're going to put a little bit of glue into the eye there. And then put our thread in and wait for that to bond. So how do we know when it's bonded? When I can tug it gently and it doesn't come out, we know it's bonded. Should grab fairly quickly. I'm actually using a new glue here, so its bonding time is about 5 seconds. So you can see I can pull that now. Okay, and this is just a straightforward, simple line. This would have had the sail hanging off it, that we would have looped around it. So it is simply seized on the eye below the little arm that sticks out at the front, so at the front of the mast. So we can calculate the... I definitely think it's better with this one here, which is line 13, to not use the block. The block's just going to get in the way. It's oversize for the gap you've got. So I've just gone with a little thread there. I think that will end up looking a lot better. Well, there we go. And I can trim the other end off now. It's worth keeping any lengths like this because you can use them for tying blocks to things like that. So I just keep them until I finish my process. And then every time I've done a line, I can cross it off on the list. So that's number 13. So number 14, I can't... That seems to be the line that goes... It's tied off on this cleat here, but needs to travel up to the top of the mast and then travel through. So it's a bit odd that it's tied off there. I think when you look at the instructions, there is blocks tied onto all 3 of these, and that it's passing through these blocks, but because of how it's organized, it's difficult to know which one. I think it's this middle one, because there is a 14 to these 2. It's a little difficult to know, but I think it's this middle one. So the line is going to go from here up to the top of the mast, and then it attaches to the top of the sail, but we're not putting the sail on, so I don't need to do that one. So I can cross both the 14s off, which then gets me to the next nearest one is 16, and that is rigging on some blocks again, I think, for a sail. So as I look at that, I don't see that that we need that one either. So I'm going to show you a quick, effective, but I must admit inaccurate way of quickly seizing your block. So by seizing, what we mean is the block should be tied by another cord. So we need to, on a number of places on this model, we need to have a rigging line that terminates with a little block, such as that. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I do that to make it look authentic, but it's quick and it's easy, but it isn't accurate. It's the same technique I use on period ships, but on period ships I will actually wrap some additional thread around it. I'll talk you through that when I get to it. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to put the block in a pair of self-closing tweezers like this, and as you look at the block you can see the holes are on the sides between the tweezer grip, and the little groove where our rigging line needs to go is visible on the top there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a length of thread. The length of thread will vary depending on the task you're doing, and we're just going to create a loop around it. So you can see I've got two ends of the thread there, and it's just looping round, and simply going to pinch it like that so that my fingers are a bit closer, and I'm going to twist. So I'm twisting it until it's tight up against the base of the wooden block. There we go, and whilst keeping hold of it so that it doesn't unravel, I'm going to get some medium CA and just apply that along the length. Now that will change the colour. As it seeps in, it will darken the thread colour, so I'm not going to mind that on this build. I'm also going to put a little bit on the top of the block where the thread is touching the block and let it seep in there. Now normally when you're doing this on black thread, it's not very visible, it just goes a bit shiny, but what we'd normally do is we'd seize this by wrapping thread around this bit that we've twisted, and then knot that off. I don't know on the Endeavour how it was done. With it being a boat from the 1930s, I imagine it was done in a different way, so I don't know, but you can see I can let go of that now, and that is done. And the reason why we do that is now in the center of the block, so the block's not off to one side. So if I show you on another one, when I first started doing rigging, I did what was obvious to me to be the right thing to do, and it proved not to be. So I'd take a loop of thread and I'd tie a basic knot and put my block on its side. This is how I used to do it. I don't do it this way at all now. And tighten the thread over the block like so. That has the advantage of holding the block much tighter than the way I've just shown you, and you absolutely don't need any CA. But look what happens to the threads. They're coming out of both sides, so you've still got to center the block, and it's a lot harder to do that, and you end up with blocks being wonky and not being in a straight line. So you need a single thread to come from the center of the block, so that's why I twist them. So yeah, twisting it just centers it. So if you look on period ships how those blocks are tied, you can see that you've got a single thread going down to the center of the block. So that's what you have to try and emulate. And I mean, here you've got a separate line, And here you can see that the line is seized, so it's got thread wrapped around it to stop it moving, and that's been done on 2 blocks there. So there's lots of different ways this gets tackled. I find that a quick and easy way of doing what we need to do. I do it for dead eyes as well, and then if you do want to seize it, you're simply wrapping thread around it to make it look a little bit more realistic. So that's my quick and easy way of doing it, and that's what you need to do on all of the blocks that you're going to need to rig on the ship. Now you need to work through the plans, work from the centre outwards, and carefully study the instructions. They're not as clear as they could be. So there you go. That's how I'm going to do all those blocks. There are some blocks that need to be tied directly to rings, so I'll just do a couple of twists and make them a little bit shorter, but ultimately that's all you need to do to get a block on a line, and the rest of it is down to making sure you've got enough thread. Always overestimate rather than underestimate. Take your measurements off the plans and then add a little bit, because you need some for knots and bits and pieces like that, and away you go. Well, I'm calling this build complete, and we haven't put as much rigging on as we could have done, because we've not put the sails on because of the issues we had. But I thought it'd be nice just to sum up my final thoughts on the kit now that the build is done. When I first received this kit, I thought it would be an ideal little kit for beginners, because with the plastic hull, you've not got to do anything with hull planking. You can get straight into laying the deck. Now I've built the kit, I see it slightly differently, and I think it's not really a beginner's kit. Not because it's particularly taxing overall, but in some places it is quite difficult and you need a little bit of experience. The most difficult bit being mounting the boom to the mast, and the quality of the instructions for the rigging is nowhere near as good as it could have been. And you think about the very detailed instructions you get building up the equipment on the deck, and then when it gets to you just working from the plans, you need a bit of experience to work through that. So although it's doable, I think you need to have got a couple of kits under your belt before you'd tackle this. I struggled in some places, partly because of generic parts. The boom hinge is a rudder hinge. It doesn't work particularly well. It was very difficult to put square section onto a triangular section and make that work. And they're using things like generic nails and stuff. It was very, very difficult to get that mounted. Obviously we did it, but it wasn't ideal, and I think a beginner would probably give up at that point, which would be a shame. So it's not a beginner's model, is my first comment. Because they're using generic parts, some of it is overscale. So the cleats, I think, are too large. They have to be usable for the rigging, so I sort of get that. And I also think the eyes are too large as well. And I wasn't impressed with the fact that they hadn't supplied us with enough to complete the model. That shouldn't really be the case. The build instructions in the main were pretty good. My only real comment was some of these rigging elements we could have put on earlier on as part of the instructions, and I think that would have worked better. So yeah, one or two minor niggles, but when completed, she looks nice, and I did enjoy building her. I just think the instructions around the rigging could be more in depth to allow newer builders to get through that process. They leave you swinging in the wind a little bit in places. I had a little bit of issue fitting the deck. You can see that the deck fits flush in the middle, but at either end it doesn't, so there's an issue with the moulding of the plastic hull, where there's not enough depth for that to sit flush. So you can sit the false deck down, but by the time you've planked the deck on the top, you've got this raised issue. For me, it's a bit of an issue because it doesn't look right. A lot of people won't be bothered. Again, some of the generic parts detract from it a little bit, but in the main, I think she looks really nice. I enjoyed building her. Doing a little bit every Saturday. It took me 12 months, but actually I had a bit of a break in there. So I reckon if you did a little bit every weekend, you probably got a good 6-month build here. The sails, if you can find a better solution to gluing them down than I was able to, then it will look nice with the sails on. I think it would absolutely look the part. But for me, the sails were breaking up when you cut them. They were fraying. I couldn't get my material glue to bond to it. So it would be good if they'd actually specified an adhesive rather than just say material glue, because my material glue, which I've used on other materials with no problem, just wasn't having any of it. So there you go. She is done. That's the Endeavour complete. I hope you've enjoyed the build. I had a lot of fun doing that. So there you go. So please join me on another build. Please hit the like button. It's greatly appreciated, and consider subscribing so you don't miss other wooden builds that I've got coming along. Until the next time I see you, you enjoy your modelling. Bye for now.